Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Amy Carnevale. What happened to her was really horrific. Honestly, I mean, you'll see as we get through the video. This case was suggested by Anna, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and of course if you have any more, please do let me know. It's also mentioned that not a lot of people talk about this case, which is just really sad. There have been some films and things made on it, a couple of them I believe. But just, I guess, in the sort of true crime world, I've seen a couple of videos on her, but not many. And it's, you know, she's not talked about a lot anymore. So let's get her name back out there and share her tragic story and just raise awareness on these horrific things and how people can, you know, hopefully prevent, you know, awful things like this happening. Maybe they can see themselves in a situation like this and get themselves out of it. Who knows? Let's get into the video. Amy Elizabeth Carnevale was born on the 13th of April in 1977 to mother Cynthia and father Michael in Massachusetts, US. She had a younger brother who was called Christopher, and her parents both had decent jobs. They lived a good lifestyle. They were able to spend money on decent holidays, things like that. You know, but sadly, they did not last together and they decided that they both needed to separate. Growing up, Amy was said to be such a happy child with a laugh that was so infectious it actually made other people laugh. She loved dancing, she loved singing, and she would often be caught dancing around with her father. In her very early later on in life, but very early teens, like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, well, that's not teens, but you get what I mean. She was really interested in doing, I mean, what kid isn't doing people's makeup, you know? There's loads of kids that love to come up and do your makeup. But she was also really interested in cutting people's hair, and she was really good at it. To say she was a kid, she was fantastic at it. She would practice all the time, and her family and friends would actually let her cut their hair because she was really good at it. She had like a natural talent for it. And that is what she was sort of aspiring to become, you know, along the lines of a hairdresser or something like that. Owning a salon or working in a salon. So she has gotten through primary school and she is heading off to high school. And she has this massive passion of what she wants to do, which was get on the cheerleading team. She was often seen outside practicing her cheers, doing cartwheels, trying to perfect it so that when the tryouts and the practices came, she was going to be ready and hopefully, you know, she would have done enough to get on this team. But not only that, she was at a time in her life where she was interested in boys too. So she was going to Beverly High School and there was one particular boy there that she had a very big interest in. Now, this boy was 2 years older than Amy, but she was just infatuated by him. His name was Jamie Fuller. He was a typical bad boy, typical troublemaker, and you say that, like, you know, a lot of girls are attracted to the bad guys and things like that, but he was a lot more than a typical troublemaker. He had a very troubled background behind him. He was raised by his mother. His father walked out on him early. She had lots of different men in her life that would abuse her. So he never ever saw like a healthy relationship in his life whatsoever. And it's really thought that the way that he was brought up massively contributed. Not that I'm excusing what he did, because never in a million years would I do that. But obviously, his background and things, it's just to sort of show where he came from, and just the way he was brought up, seeing abuse on all these women and stuff. It's really thought that that's what set his mentality around women, like more property than a loving relationship, I guess. And Amy was infatuated by him. They did start dating, and in the first few months of their relationship, everything was fantastic. She was described as a really sweet, kind, loving, natured girl. She was always very upbeat. She was thoughtful of everyone. She had a really positive attitude and saw the goodness in everyone, even when there was no goodness in them, which is heartbreaking because I guess she saw a goodness in Jamie that he didn't seem to have. Their relationship was described as passionate and intense, and it was also very unhealthy. It was very common for, after the first few months of being nice to her, you know, people to see her around and he's grabbing her arm, he's blocking her path, he's stopping her from going places. It didn't take him long before she wasn't allowed to talk to certain guys, she wasn't allowed to wear certain clothes like short skirts. And he, after about a year, I believe he did become sort of, well, I don't know if he was abusive before that, but after about a year it became physical. I believe she was nearly 14 at the time, he was like nearly 16. And he basically said to her, like, if you don't do it, it just goes to show you don't love me. You know, manipulative, coercive control again. And so she did. Because she felt like if she didn't, he wouldn't love her anymore. He'd go and find someone else. And that is basically what he threatened. So she did. She'd started having enough of it. You know, she began to get wise to him, I guess. And not only that, it had been winter. We're now coming up to the summer of 91. And she can't wear jumpers anymore. She was wearing turtlenecks to hide the bruises around her neck that he'd given her, to hide the bruises on her arm that he'd given her. But she couldn't do that any longer. She didn't tell her parents that they were even together. She more like said it was a friendship, I guess, so that they didn't invite him round, because obviously her parents would want to meet their daughter's boyfriend. So she kind of played it all off and didn't really tell anyone. But then it got to the point where she couldn't even hide it anymore. And so her parents started noticing that she had bruises around her neck. She had bruises around her arms. And they were wondering what on earth's going on and who's done this to her. So that was the end of their relationship. You know, her and Jamie ended up splitting up. But there was also another secret that she was hiding. And that was that she was pregnant too. This, of course, made Jamie even more angry. He felt like his mother had ruined his childhood. And now his girlfriend, well, ex-girlfriend, was ruining his adulthood, teenhood, whatever, with the thought of a child coming into their lives. He would often threaten that he was going to kill Amy. And those threats became more so after she was pregnant, basically saying that if she didn't get an abortion, he would go ahead and kill her. He was brimming with jealousy, with anger. He really did think that Amy was his property, not his girlfriend. But again, they were split up. The thought process that was going through his mind at this point was that he said that he didn't want to be with her anymore. I'm not sure whether that's true, but he didn't want anyone else to be with her either. So what happens when that's the situation? They come down to one thing, and that was what he was thinking. He was thinking that he was going to kill her. He had told these threats to his friends as well, and he'd been saying them for like a year at this point, like over a year, but nobody ever took him seriously. Nobody thought he would actually do it. A little bit more into his background as well. With all that stuff going on with his mum, he would turn to drink at a young age. He would also get a bit obsessed with like gym and all these people who bodybuilders and stuff, and wondered how he could get that big. And so he started taking steroids, basically. So he was like bigger. He didn't have any respect for women, and so how he exacted that control over them was aggression and things like that. So at the time he was drinking and he was on steroids, also it's believed. Amy was fed up of everything, like you would be, so she planned out a day with her friends at the beach. You know, have a good time, forget everything, forget her troubles for a day. Jamie was fuming when he found out about that. He apparently said, I'm getting sick of this. I'm going to kill her. This shit's got to stop. She won't be around anymore to go out with anyone anymore. I'm going to fucking kill her. And like I said, apparently he was on those things as well. So he goes home that day. He absolutely tears his room apart in anger, in furiosity, whatever, that's not a word, but you know what I mean. And so his mum, like, goes mad because he's torn all his stuff up and it's everywhere. She tells him to clean his room and that he's grounded. But, you know, that didn't actually last very long. I'm not entirely sure how long it lasted. But on the 23rd of August in 1991, he was allowed to go out that morning. And he called Amy. Knowing what Amy liked to do, which was obviously cut and style her, he basically called her and said that he wanted to lay everything to rest, put all their animosities aside, just settle everything, the differences between them, and also if she could cut his hair. And she reluctantly agreed to that because she just had had enough and she wanted, you know, like a peace between them. So she said yes. He kept pestering her, I believe, as well. It wasn't just a yes straight away. I believe he kept sort of going on and on about it. And so eventually she agreed. And Jamie, on the other side of it, Amy was clueless. Jamie knew everything. He had a plan laid out. He told his friends that he was going to kill her. He decided to bring 4 friends along with him, despite that Amy thinking that she was going to meet Jamie alone, obviously, sort everything out and cut his hair, and then that'd be that. His friends came Dominic Scioli, Mark DeMully, Michael Mallet, and Scott Ward, and all of them headed off to the arranged meeting spot that he had told Amy to go to. It was close by to these woods, and then as they see Amy approaching, she's confused to see why all these people are here, that she thought it was just Jamie, obviously. But then Jamie kind of, according to the friends, which is pretty convenient, he kind of separates off and goes off in front of them, and they sort of stay back behind. He meets up with Amy, and then he lures her into like the forest. And whilst he's walking up to her, out of sight of Amy, he's apparently turning around and making stabbing motions to his friends, which is just horrific. So he grabbed Amy and he pulled out a knife. He covered her mouth up. She tried to get away from him, but he grabbed her again, and he stabbed her in the stomach. He then stood behind her and dug it in, to the point where he said that he could feel the tip. I don't know, that's just too much information and it's gross, but that's what he said. She bit his hand. She was fighting for her life. She bit his hand and she tried to run away. He grabbed the back of her, like her hair, and dragged her back. Holding on to that, he then slit her throat. She apparently fell to the ground, repeating the words, "I love you, Jamie." And he decided that he'd had enough of the sounds of her gurgling and dying, and so he finished her off by stamping on her head. He said that the choking sounds that she made pissed him off, and that's why he did that. He then came out to his friends and said, "It's done." Scott at that point had already ran off. Like, as soon as he heard Amy's screams, he did a runner. I mean, so would I. I wouldn't have even gone there in the first place, but, you know, he legged it. But his friends knew that he had done the job because he was covered in Amy's blood. He then went to one of the boys' houses to clean up. He enlisted one of their help to wrap her body up, put, like, cinder blocks on her and dump her in the water. All the while he's making these sick jokes, like, they were drinking some red Kool-Aid, and he was talking about how, like, it was the right occasion to be drinking that sort of drink, referencing her blood. Just a sick psycho. And then her body was dumped in Shoe Pond. Of course, on the other end of the scene, Cynthia, her mother, was getting so worried as to where her daughter was. She was 14 and she'd not come home yet. You know, what on earth is going on and where is she? So she's getting frantic, she's ringing around trying to find people who might know where she is, and she eventually calls the police. They begin their investigation, but it didn't take them long to find out who had done this and find out about Jamie, which shocks them to the core. Jamie really felt like he had a hold over his friends, like they wouldn't grass on him. I think he threatened them as well, like, if you tell anyone, I'll do the same to you, kind of thing. And they wouldn't ever tell, but by God was he wrong, and thank goodness for that, because one by one they started coming forward to the police. They were shocked by what they were being told. Of course they were. One of Jamie's friends, actually the one who must have helped him, led the police 5 days later to Amy's body in that pond. And Jamie Fuller was arrested for the murder of Amy Carnevale. Jamie Fuller was found guilty and he was sentenced to life, basically, without the ability for parole. But then apparently some law changed that, I believe he was 17 at the time that he was convicted, and then some law changed that if you were convicted before you was 18, that you were, even without parole, that you were then allowed parole or something along those lines, and it allowed a lot of people, like bad people, out on the streets again, which is not a good law in my eyes. So he would try for parole a few times, but he was denied for that, thank goodness. Sadly, in 2009, Cynthia, her mother, died at the age of 57. A lot of people have said it was due to heartbreak. She was absolutely devastated at the loss of her daughter, and of course you would be. Jamie had a parole hearing in 2019. I believe he was 47 at that time. Don't quote me on that. But I couldn't find anything sort of after that, so I think that he was probably denied, and he is... I did find information somewhere, I can't actually remember where that was, which source it was from, but it said that he is still in prison serving his life sentence as of today, 2020. So, you know, he must have been denied parole in 2019. Thank goodness. The sad thing is here that Amy's death may have actually been prevented as well, because Jamie had actually been arrested in 1990 twice for assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, and he was placed on probation for that. As per, you know, with abusers, Amy wasn't his first relationship. He had dated other women before. He was abusive towards them. He was very violent towards them. And I believe one of them actually ended up having to move away from him. So he had like a massively abusive relationship with all these people. I believe they were the same age as him. And so he decided that because that wasn't working for him, he would go for someone more younger and probably more naive, which is when he went for Amy, which is heartbreaking. There was a film made which was called No One Would Tell. That was made in the 90s, and then another one was made in 2018, I believe, with the same name, but it was all about this case. And the title serves to remind people that Jamie was threatening this for over a year. He would tell his friends that he was going to kill Amy. He would tell anyone that would listen. And there was many people that knew about it, but nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. So No One Would Tell was a perfect analogy of this case, and it is heartbreaking. So just a quick little side note, a personal one, like if people are out there saying, I'm going to kill him, maybe don't just take that so jokingly, because sometimes I know people say that and they're joking, but they're not always joking. And he had a violent history. He was a violent person. So maybe when somebody like that says something like that to you, you know, go and tell somebody, because you just never know. And it's just so heartbreaking that maybe if Amy knew before that, something could have happened and maybe she would still be here today. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed the video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. And that's all I have today on the case of Amy Carnevale. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!